Hello, everyone. How y'all doing? Welcome, Adrian. Let me share my screen. Here's the chat. All right. Hello. All right. Let's make this smaller. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Welcome back. Let's see. Let's take a quick look at where we have been, where we are, and where we might be going. Let's see. We are going to go start week number 3. Last time we met, we finished up CSS, discussing how to use this new language to style the content, right? After having learned a bit on how to generate content using HTML, and just giving us some basic styling with headings and lists and whatnot. We learned a little bit about CSS, how we can use it to override some of the default styling. Decided to perhaps change a little bit the foreground color, the background color, the font, some of the borders, padding, margins, and so on and so forth. Right. We also took a look at introducing the concept of having content that is responsive, right? Depending on the size of the screen, you can change its layout. Right. We also saw how we could use CSS floating to come up with some nice layout, perhaps a third of the screen, then main content, and then some content on the right, so that we could lay out things not only vertically but also horizontally. Right. So we explored some of that, and so today we're going to continue CSS, but instead of writing it ourselves, we're going to take a look at how some other folks, some professionals, have written CSS. And then they make available that CSS as a library that you can link, you can download, link it to your project, and to make it easy to have projects look professional and very nifty. So we're going to look at 2 libraries today. We're going to look at Bootstrap and Font Awesome. Right. So that's this week. So the assignment, the A2 assignment, was due this past weekend, right? And it looks like most of you have completed. There was a few folks that needed some help to cross the line, and Tia's going to take a look at that later today or tomorrow. Also, the first quiz will be this week. The undergrad, we're going to have the quiz later this week, perhaps on Friday. The graduates is going to be available from today for a couple days, and so that's online, and so you should take this on your own individually. It is open book for both graduate and undergrad. Also, feel free to take a look at the slides, take a look at any part of the assignment or anything that you might have worked on through the assignment. Certainly, you're going to get asked what HTML stands for, right? So remember, hypertext markup language. Hypertext is one word, even though it's a compound word. So make sure that you put it in one single field, and certainly other, anything, any other abbreviations or acronyms that we might have been looking at for the last couple weeks. Make sure that you know them by heart. Certainly HTML, things such as HTTP, DOM, CSS. So that vocabulary should become secondhand to you. Also, make sure that you take a look at forms such as input fields and how to what do each one of the attributes do. If I ask you to do certain things like placeholders or tooltips, or give it a particular value. So take a look at that. So just review the slides. At least know where things are, so that you don't have to waste time looking for these things at the last minute. So I would go over that. Also, the fourth assignment is going to go out this week, which is going to build on the previous assignment. Right. Again, like all assignments, it's going to have 3 parts. Right. Well, 2 parts for the undergrads and 3 parts for the graduate. The both grad and undergrad will work on two sections. That is the lab section and the Twitter section. So the first section, the lab section, they're all designed to practice some of the fundamental skills for that particular week. Whereas in the Twitter part section, you're asked to apply what you learned in the labs, some of the skills, to actually build something. Right? And what we're building is a social network application that is inspired on a famous social network. So that's everybody's building the same thing throughout the semester. Now, the graduates are also asked to do a little more. There's a couple of advanced exercises, right, that go a little bit beyond and ask you to just push the edge a little bit. And you should also be working with your teammates, right? If you have identified folks that you might want to work on on the final project, you should all start to set up a project, perhaps push it to GitHub, invite others to join that GitHub, ask everybody else to clone down that project and start practicing, adding a few things here and there. Maybe you can break it up into multiple screens from the project requirements. Remember there's several screens. There's a home screen, there's a search screen, there's a results screen, profile screen, login, registered, so on and so forth. So you might want to break it up that way. Or you might want to break it up in a tier, where somebody's responsible mostly for the front end, somebody for the middle tier, some for the database. I would advise you against that. That's how we used to do it way back when. Breaking it up by layer. I would suggest instead that you practice the entire stack, right? That any feature that you're responsible for, right? You get a chance to practice the entire stack, right? The front end, right? The middle tier, the database. So you get a chance to visit all those. Okay, but at least what you have so far is you can already get started with prototyping some of these screens, and I would advise you to get going with that. I know we're not asking you to complete anything from here till after the midterm, but nevertheless, I would discourage you from leaving this to the very end. So yeah, okay. So let's get started. Any questions before we get started? All right, let's see where we are. Okay. So up to this point, you should have several branches where you have been working in the last few assignments, right? You should have a main branch or master branch, and then a couple of branches off of that. At least you should have branch number 2, A2, and if you have started working on assignment 3, then you might also have the A3 there as well. And you probably also have deployed these branches to separate URLs in the on Netlify, right? So you should have the the main application there, as well as the later branches also in there as well. So A2 should then be there. So this was the first assignment, well, the second assignment, sorry, that asked you to play around with the HTML, images and input fields, whatnot, right? And also you get started with Twitter, with doing the navigation screen and the notifications, Explorer. I guess I didn't do that. I didn't work on that. I think just only maybe the home screen. Yeah. And then you should also have the if you started on the A3 assignment, you should also have an A3 dash dash. If you already started, maybe not. Okay, where you have the this is some of the work that we played around with last week, right? That we played around with some of the layout, float, right, and the Z index and styling and moving things around and position, relative dimensions and whatnot, right? So all this is available. This is, I believe, the A3 branch, and can be found here on A3. If I have some source code here on my GitHub, feel free to copy and paste from here. If I provide you source code, then feel free to reuse it. Please abstain from using anybody else's source code or copying from there anywhere. I mean, it's fine if you grab a snippet or two from Stack Overflow, and just as long as you say where you got it from, and you don't deliberately try to make it try to pass as if it's yours, right? Try to claim credit for something that you didn't do. Okay. Okay, so yeah, you have that up and running. The TAs are gonna visit your GitHub repository, take a look at your source code, and then visit your A2 and then A3 URLs, Netlify, and give you a grade for that. So today we're gonna focus on the third week, right? Week number 3, Bootstrap. And so there's some slides here, but again, I want to give you, as much introduction to the assignment if you want to get started with that. I think it's a great way for me to just describe how to use the technology, and perhaps demonstrate using these skills, right? Building something, and then we can go back and make sure that we didn't leave out anything. So let's do that. Let's work on the upcoming assignment, just to give you a taste on what it is that we are building. Okay, so let's take a look at the upcoming assignment. So just a note on what Bootstrap is and why, and a little bit the story of behind what we're doing this week. So as you might have learned by now, right? CSS is not trivial. It's well, I mean, the concept of CSS is trivial, but the to effectively use CSS to make anything look pretty or presentable or professional, right? That's not easy, right? That's a skill set that is not easily attainable, right? And so oftentimes, the right approach is to just use a professional library, right? That already has gone through a lot of vetting and testing and quality assurance, that made by professionals that do this day in and day out, right? And just use a library that it's famous, it's very popular in the development circles, right? Instead of reinventing the wheel, right? So Bootstrap is just that. If you go to Bootstrap, the URL is getbootstrap.com. And so we're going to go through some of the features that Bootstrap provides. Now, there's tons of these libraries, these CSS libraries out there. And what I mean by library is that we have created our own CSS files, right? These index.css, right? And decided on certain naming conventions, right? And some and what the styling is. And so somebody had to come up with these names, right? And I came up with them mostly for academic purposes and how to explain to you about using the naming classes, the dots and whatnot, and all the attributes. But as a collection of classes, this could be a set of classes that I could reuse over and over, in certain projects. If I want to float something, if I want to paint something in the background green, right? These are things that I could, if I want to start working on a new HTML document, I could just include this style sheet and then go at it, right, and try to make things look pretty. So indeed, I have made my own CSS library. Well, if I spend a year or so making this look amazingly great, I might start to approach perhaps just a little bit what these folks at Bootstrap have been able to achieve, right? So they have spent their career creating these styles, right? These CSS styles, right? And making it available for us as an open source project, right? They also have paid versions and whatnot. Okay, so let me just show you some of the things that you can do with these libraries. Now, obviously, this is a very, very broad industry of libraries that compete with one another. So there's tons and tons out there, right, that are also as popular or even more popular or less popular, right, that have a following from multiple developers, right, that like this library versus another library. So I'm not going to say Bootstrap's the best. I mean, there's tons out there. One that is becoming very, very popular lately is Tailwind CSS, and I'm thinking about moving over to Tailwind at some point in the future. But and I encourage you all to explore alternatives, right? But yeah, so we're going to be focusing on Bootstrap this semester. Okay, so let me just show you what you can do. So let's take a look at Bootstrap. Examples, no docs. Okay, so Bootstrap is, again, it's a library, very easily to install, and wait, where's examples? Download. So here's just a few things of some snippets of being able to create headers at the top, where you have buttons on the right-hand side for navigation purposes, and on the left-hand side a header to navigate to the main home screen, or you can lay it out in the center, or maybe some links in the middle and some login or sign up on the right, or have links on the left-hand side. So there's a whole bunch of examples. Maybe there's some search examples on how to implement maybe like a left side, right-hand side with some search at the top. Okay, some buttons, drop downs where you can configure the search. Okay, some maybe the search down below, and sign up above, or maybe like a dashboard at the top. Okay, so there's just some examples of the things that you can accomplish. Also, they have several templates on like a home screen, where you can have like a splash with a big title in the middle, and some art or some images that you can use for iconography, and then some buttons that then allow you to navigate to some other sections of the screen. So these are just templates, right? That you can achieve this look and feel, right? Also with some some shadow effects behind these images, the rounded corners, a standard set of colors and themes that work together right? Or responsive content that breaks up the content into two sections, right, on the left and the right. Plus, most of them have these margins on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, right, that center the content, right, and making it easier to read. This is a nice centered sign-up form, kind of like a border layout with an image, to bring some attention to the content. Also, you can switch from light to dark mode, right? So these are just examples on using the library, what you can accomplish. Some other examples on if you're selling something and you might have brief introductory paragraph that describes certain features about your new product, right, or the new software library that you're selling or whatnot, right, and with or maybe some images. And notice that the nice layout where you have some standard margins between the content. Everything's rounded, right, with soft touches, and also nicely laid out with the same size of the titles, and then the icons and the two lines of paragraphs. So just tons and tons of examples on how to make things look pretty. Some examples of left-hand side navigation sidebars, right? Either with text and icons, right? Or when it's collapsed, right, where you only have the icon but larger larger iconography, or things that are also like a tree structure, right? And so if it's too long, it becomes scrollable, right? So again, some really cool examples. Okay, so let me also show you that you can see here how organized by what is it that you want to accomplish, right? So for instance, they have some examples on creating grid layouts, right, that are responsive, where you can lay out things into columns and rows that are responsive. So as you make the screen larger, bigger and larger or smaller, right, the content wraps around, reconfigures, resizes so that to fit the new size of the screen, right? So for instance, we'll go into this quite a bit on how to lay out content. Okay, multiple columns, multiple rows, and how to lay it out using the names of these classes. Okay. Okay. Let's see. All right. So let's take an example of the set of exercises that you're going to go through to become familiar with this. Okay. All right. Okay. So here's the first assignment. Now, what you're asked to do is to do, just like you've been doing for the last couple assignments, everything is being worked on in a particular branch, right? So first, the first assignment was just the main branch. Then the second assignment was an A2. The third assignment we worked on last week, and we did all the work in A3. And for this assignment, which is the fourth assignment, right, we're going to be doing our work in A4. Okay, so let me do that first. Yeah, so let me let's see. I think I'm already in the correct directory, and let's see what I need to go into Twitter, React web app, and I believe it's fall 2022. That one, very good. And we can do a branch. Okay, so it looks like we're in A3. Let's see if I have any outstanding code to commit. No, I'm up to date. Perfect. And so I'm going to create a new branch. So git checkout -b A4. So now in A4, I'm going to have everything that I already had in A3. Plus, we're going to be adding more content. Okay. So notice that says that we switched over to the A4 branch. Perfect. And so if we go to our code, right, we're going to be doing all our work in A4. So let's create a directory for A4, right? And there will be a new index file in there. This will be index.html, and this is going to be for the assignment 4, right? So this is H1 assignment 4. Let's see, there's a question in the chat. So if we want to start A4 but haven't fully completed A3, can I switch between branch and later if I make any change to A3 merge? Yes, you can. You have to be careful, right? Make sure that you understand what you're doing, right? You can't switch over to any other branch unless you commit what you have on the previous branch. You commit and then you can switch over. And yes, like you're saying, right? You need to merge A3 into A4. Be careful that you might have conflicts, right? That make sure that to not work on any source code that is shared, right? That don't trample over code in A3, because then when you merge A3 into A4, you'll have conflicts. But again, if you know what you're doing, sure. I would wait and stick to A3 until I have done that. Okay. All right, so here's A4. And so for A4, we do need to link this together. So from the top of the index, we're just going to create a link for A4. So this goes to A4. To the last one. So it's A4, A4, and this is Bootstrap. Okay. So let me run this and see that this works. Okay, there's A4. If I click on it, there we go. Navigate to A4. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to stick to this one index file throughout the rest of the lecture. Okay. Okay, so what are we asked to do? Let's see. So what we're asked to do is to, first of all, make Bootstrap available for our project. Okay. So for 50 points, you have the labs. And we're going to be doing all our work under A4 index.html. And so first of all, we're going to install the Bootstrap library. So a few ways to install it. One of the ways is to just download it. So you can just go download and compile CSS. Yep. Source, compile, minify, blah, blah, blah. So let's say download. And there's our 521 distribution zip. Let's see what's in there. And there is a directory there, distribution, and that folder has these two things, CSS and JavaScript, and we want both. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the instructions. The instructions ask you to put what you just downloaded into a directory called vendors bootstrap. All right, so let's do that. Let's put it under public and create a directory and say vendors, right? And I'm going to put here a directory called Bootstrap. Now, this is a very common way of organizing your libraries, right? So vendors mean that these are whatever's in there is stuff that does not belong to us, right? It's things that we have purchased from third-party vendors, okay, or open source stuff, or things that we've downloaded that doesn't belong to us, right? So we're going to put it under vendors. That's a very common name for something that does not belong to us. And there, under there, you can have directories for each one of the vendors, right? In our case, here's Bootstrap is the vendor, and in here is where we're going to put the two directories, right? So let's I think we're going to be able to do this. We should be able to just drag that in here. Let's see. No. Can I copy it? Maybe copy files. Can I paste them in here? Maybe. Let's see if that worked. Looked like it worked. Perfect. All right. Okay, so in there, what you're going to find is JavaScript files and CSS files. Okay, so the overall library, right? It's this one that contains everything, but they also have it, broken up into smaller ones, right? And you also have a JavaScript file as well. We're not going to need the JavaScript just yet, but I'm going to link it anyway, right? So it's there already. Okay, so let's do that. We can do that from our index page, which is, let's see, it's this one, I believe. Yep, here. And we're just going to link it like we link any other library, right? We already know how to link ours. We can link somebody else's as well, right? So we can say link, right? And we can say href, and we can go up one, then down to, let's see, I guess one up again, vendors, right? And then go down to Bootstrap, and then down to the CSS file. There it is, bootstrap main.css. Notice that it doesn't show here, right? But it's bootstrap.main.css. Actually, if you open that up, it's right here. See that? It's this one right there, bootstrap main.css. So let me show you what that is. So if you open it up, okay, it's going to be a lot of gibberish. Okay, almost that you can't. It's unreadable. Okay, it's very unreadable. There is this now there's this other one that is much more readable. Okay, notice that this has at least has new lines. There's tags that you can recognize, right? H6s and H5 and media and whatnot, right? But the minified version, you can barely read it. Well, I can't read it. It's just one gibberish stuff, right? So basically, what the min version is, right? It's this one. It's this bootstrap.css, but it has been what we call minified. And what minified means is that we have removed all the spaces, all the extra spaces, which are unnecessary for computers, right? Also, the new lines have been removed. Okay, any extra spaces have been removed, right? We add the extra spaces is useful for us so that it's easier for us to read, right? They're easier on the eyes, right? Having these white spaces. But computers don't need that, right? So minified has removed all that stuff, right? And compressed it to its smallest version. And the reason we do that is because when folks are downloading your index file, well, the browser needs to download everything that is associated to your file, right? Not only your index.html, not only this content, but also it needs to go follow that file, right? It needs to go into that file and download this as well. And you can imagine that there could be quite a few of these files that need to be downloaded, right, to reconstruct your page. So we want to reduce the amount of time needed to do the network connections to download all this stuff, right? And let's not forget the rel style sheet. Okay, perfect. Right. I'm also going to load the script file, although again, we're not going to use it until next week. So here we can say source, and we're going to go up one, then down to vendors, then Bootstrap, then JavaScript, and then I believe it's Bootstrap min, this one. There we go. There we go. Okay. All right. So yeah, we did that. Okay. So what does that buy us? All right. So if we go back to our index screen that we had earlier, this one, if we refresh, notice that already it looks better, right? For one, it has removed that ugly Times New Roman font, right? It has redefined my headers, right, to use a different font. Okay, at a minimum. So how do we use Bootstrap? So the way we use Bootstrap is we have to memorize a whole bunch of CSS, right? A whole bunch of CSS rules that allows us to invoke some of the stuff. So obviously, I'm not going to ask you to memorize any of this. You're free to take a look at the documentation all you want. Uh, you know, obviously for the assignments, for the project, and for the exams, right? Feel free to look at all that documentation. It's freely available. Right? So how do we use it? Well, I just happen to know that one of the classes that is very useful around to be used as an overall class, to capture the overall content is container. Container, like the name suggests, it's meant to contain other content. Okay, so let's just look at this first one, container. I'm going to save that. Now, if I go back to the screen and I refresh, notice what it did. Something as simple as adding some margins on the left-hand side, as well as some margin on the right-hand side, which we don't see. We would see it if we just add a lot of content. So let's if we look for a lot of ipsum, if we look for a whole bunch of content, let's just grab some text here. And let's just paste it here in a paragraph. I guess without the quotes. So if we go back and refresh, there's our content. Notice that it has added nice margins on the right, margins on the left, right? Which is a very common layout, right? In most professional websites. But that's not the only type of container. Right? Again, if I remove this container, I don't know, just make some bogus, has no matching. Notice that the default is no margins whatsoever. Right? Notice that it's stuck to the left-hand side, and it's flush. That looks ugly, right? The human eye prefers to have a nice consistent space all around the content so that it becomes visible, right? It's easier to read. So let's go back to that container and let's refresh. So again, adds large margins around the content. There's another container that I like to use as well. It's called container fluid. Right? If you refresh, it just adds a little bit of margins just around, not a lot. Right? I think it's, well, I don't know, like 8 or 10 pixels all around. Okay. I like this one as well, right? But feel free to use either one. If you want to take over the entire screen, right, and not necessarily have the limitations of those gutters behind, on either side, then container's fine. But if you want to have that nice centered one, then container we use, right? Okay, so let's keep going. So the assignment asks you to play around with some of these classes, right? We're going to just skim the surface, right? There's tons and tons of CSS that we're going to be using. You're not required to memorize any of this. Feel free to access documentation anytime you want to. It's just the realistic thing, right? That in a real environment you would have access to all this documentation. All right, so a different way of installing this library is to instead of downloading it, right, and inserting a link to a document that lives locally on your machine, is to instead point to a file that is being hosted somewhere in the cloud, right? That somebody has this file on their server, and you just point to it, okay, like this. And I don't know if this is the latest. I think this is version 5.10, and this is already version 5.20. And and so here's the version for the CDN. So CDN is it stands for a content delivery network. Okay, and it allows you to, instead of downloading the source code onto your server and you having to host that content, instead there are servers that are dedicated for doing this instead. And so you might say, well, I mean, I certainly prefer to download it, and what if that server's not up? I want to make sure that my content is always available. Well, I mean, you could guarantee these servers will be more available than yours, since this is their business, right? Their business is to always be available. And also, it can improve performance, which is might be a little bit unintuitive. You might say, well, I mean, it's it's my HTML, it's my CSS, it's all on the same server. It should be faster, right? But not necessarily. I mean, the browser is coming here and downloading the HTML, and then according to this, it needs to come back again to the same server, your server, and also download Bootstrap and bring it down. Okay. But if you instead use these CDNs, right? Let's copy that, and let's comment this out, and let's use the CDNs instead. So if I go back to the content and I refresh, notice that there's no difference, right? It does exactly the same thing. It's not broken. Let's break it just to make sure. If I break it and I refresh, notice that the styling is gone. But if I unbreak it, right, the styling is good. Okay. So you might say, well, doesn't that create a security problem or a performance problem? Because it needs to download the HTML from your server, from Netlify, say, but then it needs to go to some other server to download the CSS. And it turns out that it actually might be more performant to host it elsewhere, especially these servers that they are very popular. They are they're a popular place to go fetch content, right? These content delivery networks. I mean, that's all they do, right? They have just very common content that everybody wants, static content that everybody wants to link. And so the browser, what we'll do is that it will cache content, right? Your browser always checks to see, oh, do I already have that file or that image? Do I need to download it again, right? If it already has the image, then or file, then it says, oh, forget it. I don't have to go fetch it again, right? And now your code, if you're using your version here, then it will most likely download it, at least the very first time, right? It'll come to your server, download the HTML, and then go again and fetch the CSS, because it's from your server, and you are an unknown server. Nobody knows roaring hummingbird 1D something something something, right? So it's going to assume that it doesn't have the CSS files from that domain. So it's going to have to come and get it from your domain. But instead, if it's from this CDN, it will say, oh, well, I have gone to this server, hundreds of times before, right? When I visited Instagram, and I visited Facebook, and I visited Twitter, and I visited all these other websites, right, that are more famous than you, right? And they were referring to it, they were referencing it, and so I already downloaded it, much before I ever got to your tiny little insignificant website, right? And so I've already downloaded this CSS file once from Times, New York Times, or Wall Street Journal, and so because I've already downloaded, by the time I get to you, I already have the file, so I'm not going to go fetch it again. That makes sense? Let's see, is a question in the chat. Do we push these mins CSS in our Git? Well, it depends, right? So the question is, if I downloaded it and I installed it locally, do I push it to our Git repository? It depends, right? If you downloaded it and now you're making yourself responsible for these copies, then yes, you need to upload it, right? But what I'm suggesting is that you don't do that, right? Instead, use the linked version, right? You link version. So now you don't have to download anything. You download it. You don't download any CSS, no JavaScript, there's no unzipping, right? You just point to the source code. Now, usually, what developers will do is that they'll have two versions. They'll have, for development purposes, it is a nice convenience to have the libraries, installed on your machine, right? Especially for code ahead, right? And finding these, your IDE, if you don't have a local copy, right? Your IDE might not know how to help you on finding and doing these auto, suggestions. That only works if you downloaded the source code and it can find it, right? So that if you use this version, then you won't find it, right? Because they are linked in some other server and it cannot parse it and do all the optimization. So they'll have two versions. So for development purposes, they'll have a copy, but for production, when you deploy to Netlify, right, they'll use the linked version. Make sense? So I don't care. Whatever you feel comfortable. If you already know how to use CDNs, I would encourage you to use CDNs. If but for developers, I would encourage you to have the copy. I'm going to use the copy, right? Since I'm developing and I want to have full use of my IDE. Okay. All right. So let's continue. So the first few things that the assignment asks you to do is just a very few simple things. So for instance, it introduces container fluid, right? And it suggests that you add container to your index, which I have. Right? I use a container fluid. Let's stick to the assignment. So container. So container, just adds nice margins all around. Perfect. All right. So also, if you remember in the previous assignment, right, we were exploring how to lay out content like in a grid, right, in columns, right? So we use float to do that. Remember that, right? We put content in divs, and then we made the divs float left, right? And that made them render horizontally. Okay, and we toyed with several types of layout. Like half, 50-50, left half, right half. Then let's try like a third on the left and 2/3 on the right. Then maybe like 20% on either side, 20-20, and like in between, like take up the bulk of the content in the middle. So we were just exploring some ways of laying it out. Okay, well, Bootstrap has it down packed, right, to a science on how to do this correctly, right? And the way they do that is that they, just like we did for the previous assignment, right, in A2, right? So for A2, for A3, sorry, what we did is that we declared a row, right? If you remember, right, we declared a row, right, and several columns in between. We called it, grid row, and then grid row half, and grid row half, right, and then grid row, and then grid row, 1/3 and 2/3, right? That's what we did. Remember, we did that last week. Now, what we did that is that we use percentages, right? We say, well, the third is 33%, and the 2/3 is 67%, right? Well, using this idea, right, this is exactly what the folks in Bootstrap, they follow the same strategy to create a a plethora of classes that allow you to lay out the content really nicely. Okay. So let's play around with some of this. Right, so um, let's take a look here. Here's a grid system. I'm just going to copy that, and I'm just going to paste it in my brand new index file. And let's see, assignment 4. I'm going to paste that in there. And let's refresh, see what it looks like. Okay, so there it is. So here's grid system. Let's take a little look at the example real quick. All right, so let's see if we can understand what's going on here. So here's my H2. H2 here is just it's just a link that points to code where the example can be found online, right, for layout and grid. So it's just a hyperlink. So that's nothing big about that. But let's take a look at let's look at this row here, right? So this row, so that's reminiscent of the example that we built together last week, right? That contains, let's see, contains 2 columns. These are the 2 columns. Notice that they have classes col and col, COL and COL, plus some background coloring stuff, right? That we have not defined, right? These are all uh, uh, Bootstrap classes, right? That are defined for us, right? And we can take a look at the way they define it. If you go to text white, that's the min version, so that we can't we can barely see what that is, right? Let's point to the non-minified version. Let's point to the non-minified version so we can actually read it. Okay, so let's try it again. So if I say text white and I click on it, right, basically it's changing the color of the text to a using RGB. So RGB is that allows you to set the value using red, green, and blue portions of the light. A is for alpha, how transparent things are, and plus is using some advanced properties where you can define constants or variables, right? So that folks don't need to redefine these things. So it's a variable that declares the color white. Okay, and let's see if we have it somewhere declared here. Declared here. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. So white is just basically red, green, and blue. 255, 255, 255, which is white, right? Okay. All right. BG danger, it declares the background color. BG is background. And danger is a logical name for a color. Instead of using an actual color like we did here, white, right? It declares a logical color, right? So danger in most or in some cultures, the color red is denotes danger, right? So, for instance, the stop sign will be red, right? I guess because of the color of blood, maybe I don't know, right? So if we go and navigate, we can see the way they declared it, and again they use background color, and using the RGB, a variable that declares danger, right? So if we click on there, we can go and take a look at the declaration of the variable. Again, it's using RGB, meaning red, green, and blue. So red, notice that it's mostly red, 220, has a little bit of blue, has a little bit of green, but most of it is red, right? Oops. And then column, right? Column. So if we click on column, notice that it's using percentages and flex. We haven't looked at flex. Actually the assignment for the graduates, introduce flex and how that is used to lay out things horizontally, and then And what they have done is that these columns, right? They allow you to add any number of columns up to a certain amount of columns, right? Together. So what they do is that they logically break up the width of the screen into 12 logical slots. Okay, and so you can add any number of columns, right, up until you reach 12, right? And column all by itself means that they're all going to have the same width. So for instance, this is, if you have two, then by default, they are half and half, right? 50-50, right? So that's why this renders, 50 here and 50 there. If I, for instance, if I add another column right after it, right? And so this is, the far right, nothing political, right? And then I refresh, notice that there's the far right here on the right, okay? And I could do the same thing. I can copy this one and put it here. This would be, the far left, right? So refresh. Notice that they break up evenly. So as long as I keep adding, up until I get to 12, right? It guarantees me that they're all, of the same width. Make sense? Okay. All right. Now here's another example down below. Now, obviously, these behave like floats, right? That go horizontally. Obviously, this is a heading, but you can certainly have lots of content under there, right? So, for instance, you can have maybe a paragraph, right, for each one of these. So here you have content on each one of these, right? And if I refresh, these would be maybe articles, maybe in a newspaper or a magazine, right? Where by breaking it up into multiple columns, it makes it easier for me to read, right? It would be harder to read if you spread it across, very, very wide, forcing me to move my eye all the way left, right, left, right, left, right. Breaking it up into columns, it just makes it so much easier. Same thing with 1/3 and 2/3. Let's take a look at how to do that. So for the 2/3, 1/3, 2/3, right? The way we do that is, again, we declare a row. Well, here's a row that contains any number of columns. Well, not any number. They have to logically add up to 12. Right? And the way we do that is by, again, using a class that starts with COL for column. Right? And if we leave it out, if we don't say anything, any additional modifier, right? It means that all the columns are the same size, or at least it means fill it up with what the remainder is, right? And even it out. Now you can specify at the end of column, you can specify a modifier that says what the span of the column is, or what the logical width of the column is, and these are supposed to add up to 12. Right? They're supposed to add up to 12. So for instance, if this is 4 out of 12, then that's a third, and this is 8 out of 12, that's 2/3, right? So you have to do some math here, right? Some ratio on what the size these are, right? And notice if I refresh, notice that indeed, right, we have 1/3 on the left and right, 2/3 on the right. We can always copy some content here. Let's copy just those 2 lines. And let's paste it under here inside of the div, just to show you. There it is, and there it is. So if we refresh, so there we have, right? So on the left we have a 1/3, and on the right we have 2/3. Maybe the right can have twice as much content. There it is. Okay. Now notice that that 4 and 8 take up the entire width of the screen, right? So if I say here 7, that does not add up to 12, right? So if I refresh, notice that indeed I'm leaving out some white space here on the right that is not completed, right? Uh, and the opposite is true as well, right? If I make this 9, it's not going to fit, right? Because it adds up to 13. So if I do that, notice that 2/3, right? It's no longer 2/3, it's a little more than 2/3, right? So it spills over and wraps around. Make sense? Okay, so let's bring it to 8. So make sure that it adds up to 8, unless you have a very, important reason, like to leave out and some space there. Uh, okay. Also, just here a couple other colors that we have introduced. Danger, we said it was red. Primary is, as you've seen, it means blue, right? And danger is red. And here, warning is yellow for the 1/3. There it is, right? And then success is green for the background. Okay. Success, like maybe like money or vegetation. Here you have kind of like a left bar, sidebar, right hand sidebar, right? Below here it is, okay, where we're using a 2/12 and 2/12 for the left and the right, and then you have a 2/3 in the middle. So this is 1/6, 1/6, and then 2/3 in the middle for the main content, right? And maybe we can just copy that on either sidebar here. And for the main, we can paste a couple more. Yep, there we go. There we go. So for the sidebar, main, and sidebar. Okay, so for the colors here are, for the left-hand side, we have dark, secondary, which I believe is kind of like a gray color. Yep. And then info is kind of like a cyan, kind of bluish color. All right, everybody good? Any questions? All right, so that's just an introduction to the grid system that allows you to very easily, right, lay out things horizontally, right, and and still look professional, right? So the next part is to introduce responsiveness, right? So and again, what we mean by making a website responsive, we mean that it should be smart to know how things should render at different widths of the screen, right? If I visit Wikipedia, right, and I look for Starship, uh, Starship Troopers. So this is taking up the entire width of the screen, but the website is designed such a way that it knows what to do if it loses some portions of the screen, right? So notice that as I make this smaller and smaller, notice that the left-hand side is pretty much uh, stable, right? It's not moving. Notice that the text has been configured to wrap, right? As long as it has more space, right? And if it has no more space, it just wraps. But notice that if I keep going, at some point, notice that the left-hand side is going to start to adapt or respond, right, to the width of the screen. Notice that this has a width that if I make it a little bigger, the width increases. So did you see that? It changed here a little bit and it becomes smaller and smaller, right? It's getting narrower and narrower, right? Up until a point when it starts to get hard to read, right? And I'm just realizing that Wikipedia is not responsive. This is an example of a non-responsive website. Okay, see that? That is not what you want to build, right? So the Wikipedia folks would have failed my class, right? They should have hidden the left-hand sidebar and giving us some way to use the website still with a small screen. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at other examples. Let's see if we can find Wall Street Journal. Okay, so here's Wall Street Journal. Let's see if Wall Street Journal does any better. So notice here that the Wall Street Journal on the left and the right has this these margins on either side, right? Which is somewhat what Bootstrap is doing, right? Adding those sidebars, right? And also notice that it's nicely in columns, so that we can easily read bits and pieces of the content. And as we become smaller, let's see if the Wall Street Journal is responsive. Let's become smaller and smaller. Let's see what happens. Don't tell me Wall Street Journal is not responsive either. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it did respond. So okay, notice that at this side, at this width, right, it decided to have 2 columns instead. Notice that there's no scroll bar going horizontally. See that? Right? A horizontal scroll bar is a no-no, unless you absolutely need it, right? Maybe because you have a table that doesn't fit and you want to scroll just the table, not the whole screen, just the table, right? So I decided to use 2 columns. If we go a little further down, notice that it becomes 1 big column, right? Only 1 column, right? With just headers and titles down below. Also notice that the menu that used to be here on the left side has disappeared and become a something that appears as you toggle the menu, and it can go away and it appears when you need it, so that you can navigate elsewhere. Okay. Oh man, Dow Jones, bear market. How's the Tesla doing? 270, 276. Okay. I think it's time to buy somewhat. All right. So there it is. So notice that if I make it a little wider, it's 3 columns, right? If I make it a little wider, at some point it will become maybe, there we go. So now it's taking 4 columns. See that? Up until it reaches the widest that it doesn't grow any further. Does that make sense? Right? So the grid system that Bootstrap implements is responsive, right? What Bootstrap does is that it logically defines some very well-known sizes for screen, right? So for instance, define some logical screen sizes. For instance, this one with if you have a really large monitor, right? This width might be called extra large, right? And if you start making it a little smaller, then it goes through several smaller versions, maybe just extra large, then just plain old large, and then maybe medium, right? And then maybe small, and then maybe extra small, and then maybe extra small, what you would see maybe on a phone or something. Yes, right. So it defines all these logical names for the widths of the screens, right? And then allows you to configure how many columns you want to see, right? Do you want to see 4 columns, 3, 2, 1? Okay. And target different sizes of the screen. Okay. So let's play around with that feature. Let's see. So let's take a look at the assignment. So the assignment says let's do this, right? So let's copy this. Let's copy this and let's paste it here. So and then let me talk through this. Let's see. So paste that here. Okay. And let's see what this does. Let's render it. Let's print it. Okay. Okay. All right. So first, let me put it at small at 100%. There we go. So 100%. Here's column A, B, C, and D. And let's add some content because it's kind of boring because there it is, right? So right now we just have a row and we have a couple columns, right? And then and then close it up here and just column A, B, C. I'm just going to add maybe just one paragraph to each, um, so that we can see what's going on here. Let's refresh. Okay, so each one has a little bit, maybe some more. So it's a little bit more dramatic here. There we go. So we got 4 columns. Notice the behavior, right? As we are, fairly wide, right? We have 4 columns. As we become smaller, let's see what happens. Okay, so notice that there's like a break in between the two here, right? Between these sizes. It's the same exact layout, but, right, it's slightly narrower, right? Notice that the margins grow, right? So notice that here the margins are a little smaller, and then when we cross a particular width of the screen, right? Notice that the margins become wider and everything just shrinks, right? And the text just wraps to make the content taller. All right, so let's keep going. Okay, notice what happens here. Again, another break. I've reached a threshold that, notice that the bottom columns are always, they're sticking to their original layout, right? That hasn't changed. Same thing, the 1/3, 2/3 hasn't changed, and then the sidebar, main content sidebar hasn't changed. They're following their original layout, right? They are not responding to the change in the width. Okay, they're maintaining their original ratio of layout. Okay, they are shrinking, obviously, right? And the content just becomes, narrower and narrower as you go. But notice what happens to the top ones, right? Which are responsive. And by responsive, we mean that it chose, right? It decided that, any narrower than this, the content is going to be hard to read, right? So I'm going to maybe switch over to, 2x4 instead of 4x1, right? And decide to move the column C and D below, right? So I'm going to expand A and B over to the other, all the way so it takes up the whole screen. But C and D, I'm going to move down, right? They're going to wrap down, right? So let's see, there we go. So you see C and D move down and A and B expanded. So let's keep going, right? So at some point, I'm going to reach another threshold. Okay, all right. So this one just stuck to the same layout, right? So it's just you made it narrower, but we kept the same layout. Right? So let's keep going down further. Okay, this one decided to say, okay, it's going to be too narrow, right? If I keep the same layout as before, my columns are going to look silly, right? They're going to be way, way too narrow, right, for me to be able to read this comfortably, right? Same thing down below. Notice my sidebars, have become almost unreadable, right? And they're starting to spill over, right? A better solution might have been to maybe hide the right-hand side of the sidebar, maybe lend the width of this right sidebar, lend it to the left sidebar, so that it can expand and have some space, right? That might have been a better solution, right? But notice that the responsive version is indeed adapting, right, and deciding, and that for different sizes of the screen, right, I'm going to choose different layouts, right? And so this one chose that it's too narrow. I'm just going to use just I'm going to stack the content, right? Instead of columns, it's just going to be one long column, just like the Wall Street Journal. Up until I reach, here's yet another threshold, right? And here it's just removing any margins, right? Just expanding its content all the way, to the edges, right? And notice that the the other layouts just become, somewhat unusable, right? So we do want to have this capability, right, of being able to choose how to lay it out. So let's see how we achieve that. Let's see how we achieve that. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So first of all, we start off that there is one row, even though this doesn't look like a row. This looks like 4 rows, right? But indeed, it's just one big row. And then the columns inside, there are 4 columns. These 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, and 4. these 4 columns. All right, these are the 4 columns. Now, these 4 columns, in the best case scenario, they are indeed rendered as columns, right? It's just that these columns are smart, right? They know what to do if they don't have enough space, right? They will adapt. So how do we adapt it? Here we go. Okay. So this is how we are adapting it. Right. So let's read this. So what this says is the following. Notice that these are columns with a number afterwards. And we already know what that means, right? We already know what that means. It means, right, in the previous example, where is it? Where'd it go? Grid system. Yeah, these here, right? These down here. So column 2 means that this is going to be 2 12ths, meaning 1/6. This is going to be 2/3, and that's going to be 1/6. Remember that, right? And that's how we achieve this bottom layout, right? Same thing with this one. This row was 4 and 8. It means that this is 4 12ths, which is 1/3, and this is 2 8 12ths, right, which is 2/3. Okay, and this is how we achieve this layout. So that we know what this means, right? 4 12ths or 8 12ths, correct? That's how wide that is. So what is this saying? This saying is that these 4 columns, they want to be 12 12ths, all of them. They all want to be 12 12ths. What does that mean? It means they all want to take the entire width of the screen, right? 100%. They all want to be 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%. Well, 100% plus 100% plus 100% plus 100%, that's 400%. So there's no way these 4 columns are going to fit, right? So what this says is that they all want to be 100%, all of them. And what happens? They don't fit, so they wrap. And there they are. Now they're all taking 100% of the screen, the narrowest screen. Okay. So the way this is read is that this is going to be 100% up until it meets the next screen size. Which screen size? Medium screen size. Okay. When it reaches the medium screen size, then I'm going to use a different nomenclature here. Right? It's going to be 6 12ths, 6 12ths, 6 12ths, 6 12ths. Right? So between the smallest all the way when it reaches medium is going to be 100%. So it's this one, right? It's me making it big, 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%. Medium. We have reached medium. So this is small. This is medium. Small, medium. Okay. So if this is medium, what is this? That's small. And this right here, that's extra small. That's small. That's extra small. So extra small is taking up 100%, and extra small is still 100%, but it doesn't go all the way to width, to the edge of the screen. Okay. There's a question on the chat. Let's see. The order how the class is called doesn't matter, right? The order. The order, you mean the order in which they're declared here? It does not matter. Yeah, the order in which they are declared, it does not matter. All the rules trigger all at the same time, and you have to make sure that they don't collide, right? President, your screen freezes when you are in the process of resizing the screen. Oh no. Really? What? Oh no. Speed test. What's my speed here? Enter speed test. when you release your mouse, it updates the screen. Let's see what my speed is. It's 500, 600. Okay, wow, I got 700 megabits per second. I wonder if it's a Zoom issue. Isn't the speed issue? I believe it's, yeah, it's even Zoom. Probably some issue with Zoom not capturing the intermediate steps. All right, no, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, no, the speed is pretty good, but I did not know Zoom had those issues. Thank you. Okay, yes. Right. Right. So what I was saying is that as I as I'm going smaller and smaller and smaller, right? When I reach medium, all these are 6/12, meaning 1/2. Right. So when I reach medium, which I'm medium right here, so this is then there's over here I'm going to be large. Oh no, that's yeah, that's extra large, and that's extra large. So that's extra large, that's extra large, that's medium. Okay, that's and that's small, and that's extra small. Right. So extra small and all the way up to small is going to be 100%. So that's extra small, small. Now when I get to medium, I'm at medium. These are all 1/2s, 1/2s, 1/2s. So 1/2 plus 1/2, that's 100%. So the next 1/2 doesn't fit, so it wraps. So this is also our half, so it fits into this 1/2 here. All the way when I reach large, that's still large. Okay, so it's large. So meaning between medium and large, right? All the way up to when I reach extra large. So just medium and large, I'm going to be half and half, right? So that's medium and that's large. So both of them are half and half, right? 6/12, right? And up until when I get to extra large, so that's extra large right there. That's extra large. Then it's going to be 3/12, right? Which is 1/4. So these are all 1/4, which they times 4, they add up to 100%, and that's going to be all the way up to extra large as well. There it is. So that's extra large, that's extra large, and all the way that's as big as you can get. Right? They're all going to be 1/4. That makes sense, right? And that's how you make things responsive. That's how you can make things responsive. Now you can play around with things. So for instance, there's nothing. That's for now for extra small. There is no, there's no XS, okay? Or there's no XX small, right? No such thing. But there is small. There is small. There it is. So let's play around with this. Let's play around with this a little bit. Notice that for extra small to small doesn't say anything for none of them, right? But I could say something. I could say that, hey, for small, right? Let's maybe do 4, right? Let's do 8. Let's do 5, 5 and 7. Okay, let's do that. Let's see what that does. Right. So if I refresh, okay. So so for the extra small, they're all 100%. But when I get to small, it's not going to do that. Let's see what it does. Okay, there it is. So for small, I said 4 and 8. That's 12. That's 12. This adds up to 12, and that's 5 and 7. See that? So I might want to do that layout or whatever, right? And then when it gets to medium, right, it goes back to all of them having the same half, right? So anyway, so that's that. Let's keep going. And here's just another more dramatic example of doing all single columns, and then as you get smaller and smaller and smaller, it becomes increasingly more columns, right? Less columns. So another thing that is important to learn is what happens with content that you might just want to disappear. Right? So for instance, the Wall Street Journal does that, right? For instance, one of the things that they do is that this menu at the top, right? They disappear it. They just hide it away so that you can click on something and it appears. Also, this opinion on the right-hand side just completely disappears, right? So for instance, if I go and it becomes smaller and smaller, right? Notice that it decides that it takes away, so it keeps the opinion, but the left-hand side, I think it's rid of this, right? These headlines here, China and Meloni and whatnot, right, are removed. It only keeps the main, it keeps the main stories and opinions, right? So there we go. So it removed the headlines, and as you become smaller and smaller, it decides that okay, I'm only going to keep the main stories, and I'm going to hide the opinions. I don't even, okay, it did move them at the bottom, right? It kept them at the bottom, right? But you might just want to hide them and just say, okay, I don't want to even show it. Okay, so how do we do that? We want to be able to target content that we want to disappear entirely, right? So let's take a look at that. Let's copy that and let's paste it here. So there's a question on the chat. So can you try resizing and releasing mouse this time? Let's see. Yeah, no, that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. Thank you. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so what I've done here is that I've just created these blocks, right? And what's going to happen here is that they are configured so that they only appear at certain times, right? So for instance, XS is only going to show up in extra small, right? And this was only going to show in small. This is only going to show in medium. This is only going to show in large. And this is going to be extra large. And this is extra large. All right. And so let's see if it works. Let's take a look at it. Let's refresh. Notice that this is indeed showing at the screen of extra large. None of the other pieces of content is showing up. So as I resize this, notice that as it becomes smaller and smaller, notice that now it's showing only the extra large content. And as it becomes smaller and smaller, we're going to go into medium. Oh, large, sorry. There's large, right? And as it becomes smaller, right, this becomes medium. There it is. And smaller, then it should become small. There it is, small. And finally, it gets to extra small. There it is. So let's take a look at this. So how does this work? How does this work? Okay, so it says, so first of all, it's adding this style that we never installed. This is using a multiplier that makes the text bigger, but I never installed this library. But I think I have text. I think they large opacity. No, they don't have a. And no, they don't have it. Okay, never mind. Okay, I don't have that style. I haven't installed it yet. That's font awesome, and that's what we're going to be talking next. But let's look at this. So this is what's doing the magic of showing and hiding things. Okay. All right. So first of all, here we have D block. So what this says is that I want this to show always up until I get to this size, none, right? So we use two styles between block and none. So D block and D none allows you to decide to show or hide content, and you can target specific screens. D block, right, has different versions. There's D block, there's D small block, D medium block, D large block, D extra large block, and D extra large block. It means I want the following content to show or start showing at these screens. So this only applies, this is kind of like a better name might have been show, and none, the better name might have been hide. Actually, an earlier version of Bootstrap used those names, right? Hide and show, which I thought was much more intuitive, right? But they recently changed this nomenclature to be block and none. Okay, so the way this is read is that from the smallest screen, right, from the extra small screen, all the way up to the small screen, this should show. So that means that this only shows for the extra small. When it gets to small, poof, it's hidden, it's gone, right? This one reads at the beginning, right, from the extra small, this should not show. It should start showing at the small screen, but then when it gets to the medium screen, it should not show anymore, right? This says it should start not showing. It should start showing at the medium screen and stop showing at when it gets too large, right? So notice that these are all designed so that they are overlapping in logically, right? So for instance, if we remove so let's play around with this some more. For instance, let's copy this and let's do another one. So we'll call it cumulative showing responsive content. So for this, let's remove the none. All the nones been removed, meaning we're never going to hide anything. Okay. All right. So let's see how that works. So for instance, if I refresh, so notice that here's extra small, and as I make this bigger, it shows additional. There it is, extra small and small. And as I keep going, notice that now it shows the medium. So now it shows all three, right? And then as I keep going, right, now it shows large. See that? And as I keep going, it shows for extra large. There it is, right? And as I keep going, now it's extra large. There it is. Shows all four, all of them. Make sense? Let's see. Is there a question on the chat? We specify deep block only. Is the rest size block by default none? No, you have to specify none specifically, explicitly. Yeah. So now knowing these techniques and playing around with this, and I would suggest that you explore some on your own. You are asked to implement the following, right? Later on in the Twitter application, right? For instance, if you have in the Twitter app down below, you are asked, okay, now that you know how to hide and show stuff, right? Implement the following. Twitter is that implement the explore screen so that at first it looks like this, right? You have 3 columns, right? There is some margins on the left, margins on the right, right? And you have a smaller column on the left. You have kind of like a little bigger column on the right. So this might be maybe 2, and this might be 3. And then in the middle, you have like this big content in the middle, right? So And I think I asked you that the one in the middle is half the screen, so that'd be 6. That means that the one on the left and the right, they have to add up to 6. So maybe it's 2 on the right and then 4 on the right. So 2, 4 plus 6, that's 12. That's on the extra large. And then as you get smaller, right? This is still half, so that's 6, right? And they get squished a little bit, maybe, right? So the layout is the same, maybe, right? Maybe this is also 2 and 4, and this is 6. Although this one might be too small, and the text might need a little more space. So we can borrow from some space from the left-hand side and give it to the right-hand side. So if this were, maybe 2 and 4, maybe this becomes now 1 and 5, right? Or maybe maybe we can borrow from the middle. This is still 2, maybe 5 from the middle, and then 5 on the right, right? So you can borrow from some of the other columns. Okay. Then when we get down to the one below, and the large, when you get to large, there's not going to be space for the text on the left-hand side. So we're going to ask you to please hide the text, just only keep the icons, right? Here on the right, it is okay that some of this maybe spills over, maybe the checkbox, right? The check mark, that's fine if it spills over a little bit to the right-hand side. It should not wrap. None of these should wrap. Okay. Also notice that the bottom is also changing, right? The bottom is also changing, right? It's becomes narrower and narrower. And so the layout is also going to change a little bit, right? So this one, we're hiding the content. Then when we get to medium, the entire right-hand side of who to follow is going to disappear. Poof, it's gone, right? It doesn't fit. I'm going to remove it and just keep the 2 parts, the 2 columns left. And then the small, notice that the tabs are not going to have enough space. So just drop the last tab, right? So the entertainment goes away. You don't have more space for that. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. All right. So that's the Twitter part, right? You're going to be playing around with styling this, highlighting it, creating tabs, right? And some input fields. You're going to add some nice rounding effects, right, for the images. And for that, we're going to play around in our next lecture. Now for the challenge part, we ask you to implement what you just learned, right? That you just practiced in Twitter, but apply it to another screen. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's all I had for you today. Any questions? So remember, I am running office hours every morning from 8 to 9. We ran this one this morning. We had a couple of students there that I helped. But if you need some help, so except tomorrow. Tomorrow, I do have an event at my son's school. They're going to be connecting to the International Space Station, and my son's going to be asking a question to one of the astronauts. It's a pretty cool event. Just trying to, the school trying to promote the STEM fields, science and technology and whatnot. So it's actually funny because my older son, he did aerospace engineering at Purdue. He's a big space buff, and he's working now at Blue Origin. He's hoping to work at SpaceX, but that's very competitive for now. But I think it's a good step towards what he wants to achieve. But yeah, that's my older son. My youngest son, he's also enthusiast, but not quite as much as my older son, but it's funny that he gets to tuck to the International Space Station tomorrow. So anyway, that's an all-day thing tomorrow, and so I'm going to be mostly unavailable. Although I'll try to answer a question on Piazza. If you have any questions, I'll try to follow there. But yeah, no office hours tomorrow. Okay. All right, excellent. Thank you, everyone. Good night.